Hello, Magic players and collectors. Welcome to the Land Library. I'm your librarian, and in this episode of Latest Loadout, I'm covering another backlog set, Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Outlaws of Thunder Junction released on April 19th of 2024 and is a normal standard set. The set takes place on a plane called Thunder Junction, which is based around like the Wild West and cowboys. So this set predictably features a lot of deserts. And that's pretty much all I've got for background information, and we'll just get right into the lands. As always, the first returning lands are the basics. There's a normal set of basics with the 2 prints for each, and a set of full arts of 1 each. These full arts are pretty cool though. They have like the features, backgrounds on the cards outline the different mana symbols of their different colors. These are pretty neat. And then there's the enemy color fast lands. These are dual colored lands that come in tapped unless you have 2 or less lands in play when you play them. All rocking new desert themed art, including Blooming Marsh, Botanical Sanctum, Concealed Courtyard, Inspiring Vantage, and Spire Bluff Canal. These also have a really cool borderless versions that line up with each other to make a big panorama of a train. There's also 2 special guest lands in this set. Side note, I completely forgot about the special guest Secluded Courtyard when I made the Bloomborough video. Uh, Whoops, but I'm mentioning it here. But back to this set. Desert and Prismatic Vista both got special guest treatment. Starting with Desert, this is a classic land, the first ever to have a non-basic subtype actually, first printed all the way back in Arabian Nights in 1993. This land can tap for a colorless, or can tap to deal 1 damage to a target attacking creature at the end of combat. It's a really awesome art on a truly classic land, and I'm so glad to see it still getting attention. And as for Prismatic Vista, it isn't quite as classic, originally from Modern Horizons in 2019, but it's still a good land. It's a wild card basic fetch land. Tap, pay a life, and sack to search for any basic, and put it into play untapped and then shuffle. This art is very lovely and fits really well with the rest of the set, with all the desert theming. So both of these are pretty great cards. And that's it for packs. But, of course, that doesn't mean that's all there is. There is still the Commander set. And there's only a few with new art here. They're actually just a single cycle. A cycle of enemy-colored dual colors. These all have a cost of 1 and a tap to make both of their colors of mana. All of which were first printed in the Fallout set, and some have made appearances in the Rapid Fire section in other videos, but this was actually the set that gave them the new art that's then gone on to receive reprints and be in the Rapid Fire, so these are not in the Rapid Fire for this one. These lands are Desolate Mire, Ferris Lake, Sunscorched Divide, Overflowing Basin, and Viridescent Bog. And with all that taken care of, it's of course time for the previously alluded to Rapid Fire section for reprints with nothing new. This includes Access Tunnel, Battlefield Forge, Blackcleave Caves, Bojuka Bog, Bonder's Enclave, Canyon Slough, Cascading Bluffs, Caves of Koilos, Clifftop Retreat, Command Beacon, Command Tower, Dark Slick Shores, Darkwater Catacombs, Demolition Field, Desert of the Fervent, Desert of the Indomitable, Desert of the True, Dimmer Aqueduct, Dragonskull Summit, Drowned Catacomb, Dunes of the Dead, Evolving Wilds, Exotic Orchard, Fetid Heath, Fetid Pools, Flooded Grove, Frostboil Snarl, Hashdeep Oasis, Hinterland Harbor, Isolated Chapel, Is at Boiler Works, Jungle Shrine, Crosan Verge, Llanowar Wastes, Nomad Outpost, Opulent Palace, Painted Bluffs, Path of Ancestry, Ramonep Ruins, Reliquary Tower, Rogue's Passage, Rugged Prairie, Scattered Groves, Scavenger Grounds, Shadowblood Ridge, Sheffet Dunes, Sheltered Thicket, Sheevan Reef, Smoldering Marsh, Sulphur Falls, Sulphurous Springs, Sunhome Fortress of the Legion, Sunken Hollow, Tainted Peak, Temple of Deceit, Temple of Epiphany, Temple of Malady, Temple of Malice, Temple of Mystery, Temple of Silence, Temple of the False God, Temple of Triumph, Terramorphic Expanse, Twilight Mire, Underground River, Vault of the Archangel, Woodland Cemetery, and Yavimaya Coast. Outlaws of Thunder Junction actually has quite a bit of new lands, most of which are deserts, actually almost exclusively of which are deserts. And first off, we have a set of all 10 dual colors. These all come in tapped and deal 1 damage to a target opponent when played, and then can tap for either of their colors. These are Abraded Bluffs, Bristling Backwoods, Creosote Heath, Eroded Canyon, Festering Gulch, Forlorn Flats, Jagged Barrens, Lonely Arroyo, Lush Oasis, and Scoured Springs. These also are in the land rarity, so you can pull these instead of your basics. The rest are all standalone lands with pretty wildly different effects. Starting with Arid Archway, this land comes in tapped and bounces a land you control back to its owner's hand, which will most likely just be yourself unless you somehow stole a land. And if the bounced land was a desert, you get to Surveil 1, and its mana ability is tap for 2 colorless. The next one, Conduit Pylons, also has a Surveil 1 effect, but it's just by playing it. But this does not come in tapped, and can tap for 1 colorless, or can color change a mana by paying 1 and tapping for any color. Moving to Mirage Mesa, this land is a wildcard land that chooses a color when played, and then taps for a mana of that chosen color, although it does come in tapped. And now for Rogue's Passage, Sandstorm Verge. This land is very similar to Rogue's Passage, but is a desert, costs only 3, and is at sorcery speed. So for 3 mana and a tap, it makes a target creature unable to block this turn. It being sorcery speed doesn't really do a lot, because why would you need to make a creature unable to block on someone else's turn anyway? You can just not block if you don't want to block. And the last main set land is Bucolic Ranch. This land comes in untapped and can tap for a colorless, or can tap for any color, but that mana can only be spent on casting a mount, which is a new creature type introduced in this set. Additionally, for a cost of 3 and a tap, you can look at the top card of your library, and if it's a mount, you can put it in your hand, but if you don't want it, or if it's not a mount, it goes to the bottom of your library instead. Now on to the non-main set cards. In Commander, there's only 1 new land, Cactus Preserve. This land enters tapped and taps for a mana that any of your other lands could produce. Otherwise, for 3 mana, Cactus Preserve can transform into an XX creature with Reach until the end of turn, with X being the greatest mana cost of any of your commanders, which is normally 1, but occasionally you can play around with that one ability that lets you have 2 commanders, so it's the greatest of them. And the next 2 are in packs, but they're in a subset called the Big Score. These are Fomori Vault and Tarnation Vista. Both of these have a regular art, extended art, and showcase version, but Tarnation Vista also has a raised foil print, which doesn't really show up on my card scans, but it does have a different set number, so it's different. Moving on to what they actually do, though, Fomori Vault taps for a colorless, or for 3 mana, discard a card and a tap, you look at the top X cards of your library and put any one of them into your hand, and the rest back on the bottom of your library, with X being the number of artifacts you control. And Tarnation Vista comes in tapped, chooses a color when you play it, and then taps for a mana of that chosen color, or, for 1 and a tap, it makes a mana of every color that you have a monocolored permanent of. And that's it for the new lands. So starting off with the dual colors, these are known as the ping lands, and are generally pretty good. Free damage, and a dual color land to boot. Only problem is that they come in tapped, but that free damage is really useful for decks that use dealing damage to trigger effects, along with cards like Spelunking, which can just kind of negate coming in tapped. The ping lands have a pretty decent potential. Sandstorm Verge, like I kind of joked about earlier, is just Rogue's Passage, but kind of better. It's a cheaper cost and is more interactable due to its subtype, but Rogue's Passage might be a little better in Commander to try and make an opponent not be able to block another opponent, because Sandstorm Verge can't do that specifically. Arid Archway is pretty decent in the right niche. For example, bouncing your own land can be quite beneficial in a landfall deck, because then you can just play it again for more triggers, which is already a pretty strong deck type, and since it makes 2 mana per tap, it makes the mana loss from bouncing a land even out, even not in a landfall deck. When paired with other deserts, you can get in some free surveils. This is just all around a pretty solid card. Conduit Pylons is a decent mana fixing land. Gets a free surveil and can change your mana colors. Nothing too crazy, but it definitely is a decent land for multicolored decks, especially if you're running other deserts. Tarnation Vista is a bit of a silly land, but it has really great potential. It can potentially make Wooburg mana on its own if you have a deck full of monocolored permanents, but it doesn't really do anything other than color fix a colorless mana in a monocolored deck, which you probably aren't going to really be needing to color fix a lot in a monocolored anyway. Or if you're running multicolored cards, it still doesn't do much. So it does need a specific type of deck around it, but is absolutely stacked in that right type of deck around it. Fomori Vault is, I think, the best land in this set. I'm uncertain about the prevalence of artifact decks in current standard, but artifact decks are so good in Commander. They're really strong, and this is an incredibly good artifact support land. Looking at cards equal to the number of artifacts you have can just skyrocket, and you get to keep one of anything. No restrictions other than you only get to keep one card, but that card can be anything. This is an incredibly good searching ability that makes a broken deck type even more broken. Cactus Preserve is a bit odd, but it's good. Its mana ability is very good, and its transformation ability is okay. It's got a decent cost to reward ratio. X being the mana cost of your commander can be really crazy, especially since it doesn't say it requires your commander to be on the battlefield, just the cost of your commander. Imagine you're running a 10 cost commander, even with it just sitting in the command zone. Cactus Preserve becomes a 10/10 with reach for 3 mana. Unless I just don't understand how this card works, that seems really good. And Mirage Mesa is incredibly mediocre. It's just a locked in single color. It benefits from the choice of color, although it's not as interactable as a basic, it's still interactable because it has a subtype. So, it kind of is a basic, but better in a desert deck, but maybe about the same as a basic outside of a desert deck. Definitely not bad, but it's not that good either. Bucolic Ranch is a bit hard to use effectively. I'm not really sure how used mounts are. It's a creature type and mechanic exclusive to this set, so 3 mana to maybe draw a card, or to put it on the bottom of your library, is not a great cost to reward ratio. I can see it being okay in drafting because you're a lot more likely to actually have mounts in your deck, but I don't really see it getting any play outside of that. For Standard, this is a 4 out of 5. There's some pretty decent lands to run in Standard in this set, the biggest thing being the enemy-colored fast lands being reprinted into Standard. That's meta level stuff. And although this isn't necessarily a huge shakeup to the meta, it's still a solid addition. For Commander, 5 out of 5. This set drops some crazy Commander lands. Fomori Vault and Cactus Preserve go absolutely wild in Commander, along with the huge amount of desert support, mana fixing, and dual colors, getting a bit better in Commander, and even cards like Command Beacon and the Fast Lands getting easily accessible reprints in this set is just everything is chef's kiss for Commander. The theming, 5 out of 5. This set goes so hard on its theme. Every art is Western. There's deserts, there's cactuses, and these panorama borderless cards are such a good example of just everything going together really well. For the art, solid 8 out of 10. The art in this set is pretty nice. The connected panorama cards I just mentioned, so great. The clever full art basics, the showcase big score cards, those amazing special guest cards, even plenty of new arts on regular returning lands. The only thing that's really missing is alternate versions for some of the new lands. We only got multiple versions of returning lands or the big score. And I would have really liked to see some of the regular cards getting some alternate versions. And that means this overall score is a 22 out of 25. This is a top tier set for lands. The highest score so far. Amazing theming, really useful cards, and great art. This is just an amazing set for land lovers everywhere. If you've made it this far in the video, please drop a like, return, and subscribe for more land-filled content. If I missed anything, got anything wrong, or you just have questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next backlog latest loadout with Murders at Karlov Manor.